Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And on the line with us is Malcolm Nance. Malcolm is a U.S. intelligence expert, author of several books, including his latest, The Plot to Destroy Democracy. His website, thetacticsofterror.org. You can tweet him at Malcolm Nance, N-A-N-C-E. Malcolm, welcome to the program.
Good to be here, Tom.
Great to have you with us. You noted the other day on Bill Maher's show something that just absolutely shocked me and that I thought really needs to get more highlighting. And I'm even thinking that probably it hasn't, because much of the media just doesn't want to go there. It's such an extraordinary place. And that is that you suggested that the private meeting between Trump and Putin was essentially a second Yalta. Can you talk about that, please?
Sure. Well, if you think about it, certainly the way that Russia has spent the last decade or more co-opting practically every conservative movement in Europe, and now over the last 4 years has co-opted the American Conservative Party, both through the evangelical movement, certainly with their anti-gay campaigns, and the National Rifle Association, and now apparently the entire Congress of the United States. You know, Donald Trump, prior to this, really didn't have any real strategic worldview. He was out to make money. And only recently have we seen, in the last few years, that he's adopted completely the Kremlin party line in how the world should be viewed. That being said, the plan of Russia and Vladimir Putin, former KGB officer, ex-director of the FSB, which is the successor to the KGB, is quite simply to be the leader of the Christian conservative movement in the world. And in fact, many Americans over the last 10 years have said just that. They believe Russia to be the heart of Christian conservatism because in the post-communist world, Russia determined that that's what they were. They were always a conservative nation, and without the yoke of communism on them, they could create their own destiny. Donald Trump is a manufactured asset of that destiny. And that being said, him and Putin alone in the world were, in my opinion, affecting what they essentially have been saying in public, which is that the old world order of NATO, the Atlantic Alliance, the axis between Washington and the European capitals is old, defunct, and should be done away with. And Donald Trump is in complete agreement with that. You saw just a few days before he had called the European Union our foe, essentially our enemy, and that NATO needed to essentially pay up in an extortionate-like scheme. Yeah. Therefore, sitting down with Putin, you come to the conclusion that these two were affecting that world order, and we were seeing a 21st century Yalta, where they were deciding how that was going to be.
Now, Yalta was where Churchill, Stalin, and Roosevelt sat down and carved up Europe and Northern Africa. Are you suggesting that there was an actual, let's sit down and carve up the world? Okay, you can have, we're going to get Poland, you can have Hungary. I mean, or is this a metaphor?
It's more of a metaphor, but if you think about it, just in terms of how Donald Trump behaves. And, for years I had been trying to wrap my head around how did Trump adopt the philosophy that he has? Where did his worldview come from? It certainly didn't come from, his doing business around the world. It really came from a meeting that he had in 2013 at the Miss Universe pageant, where he sat down with the 12 richest men of Russia in secret, just like this meeting in Helsinki, in secret for 2 hours. And when he came out of that meeting, you can see the transformation in all of his tweets and his comments. He came out speaking the Russian party line, every word of it. I mean, within 3 months of that meeting, Russia would invade Crimea, and Trump would be praising Vladimir Putin and hammering Barack Obama as a weak leader. And also at the same time, we now find out he had already made plans to run for president. He had registered Make America Great Again PAC as early as November 2012. So that being said, speaking sort of metaphorically, the carving up of the world was essentially done when Donald Trump became president, and it established the United States as a Western axis of this axis of autocracies that Vladimir Putin has been harboring, that he tried to bring into power in Austria. He did bring them into power in Austria. Actually, he funded a group that was an ex-Nazi party, that was literally a Nazi-founded organization in 1952, now took party with Hans Christian Strache, the prime minister of Austria, just in 2016, tried to take control of the government of France by placing Marine Le Pen at the head of that. But each one of these parties, they're not even Eurosceptic, the way they used to call it. They are anti-Europe. They are anti-NATO. They are anti-international treaty regimes that have existed since World War II. And Putin has managed to co-opt a fair part of Europe. So Trump, Putin, and these European conservative parties like La Lega and the Five Star Movement in Italy essentially were, de facto taking sections of the old world and moving it towards a conservative consensus.
But to what extent might that be, kind of great minds think alike, as opposed to, one person controlling another or one country controlling another? I mean, the same forces that made Russia conservative, largely, number one, our sending over a bunch of people from the Chicago School of Economics to advise Boris Yeltsin on how to privatize his economy, and they were all libertarians. They basically said, "Oh, you don't need government structure. You don't need regulation. Here's how you privatize the country." And it was guaranteed to create an oligarchy. I mean, there were people at the time saying this is going to create an oligarchy. Also at that time, Russia was dealing with the Chechen rebels. They had a Muslim insurgency going on inside their country and on their own borders. These are the things, these kinds of forces that people, it tends to frighten people. They hunker down, they get conservative, they go reactionary, they go military. You're seeing now, as a result of the destruction of the Libyan government, 600,000 people have fled from Libya across the strait there, right into southern Italy. 300,000 of them are still in Italy. Paul Krugman was writing about this last week, Thomas Friedman was. And they spread from there into other parts of Europe, and the backlash to this has prompted Orban in Hungary and in Poland now, and numerous countries to just go right. And these right-wing movements are springing up. Could it just be that they're all basically reacting to the same forces, and therefore, of course, they're going to align?
Well, that's all completely possible. But you also have to take into account. Let's step back from to the fall of the Soviet Union. You had a nation that once liberty, quote unquote, liberty and democracy had come to that country, they lost their bearings. They really did not know what they were supposed to be. I mean, by 1995, Russians were actually taking polls saying that they would prefer the reestablishment of the Soviet Union and the central government than to the kind of, American free-thinking liberty that they thought that. No,
I was there. I was working in Kaliningrad for a little while, with an international relief organization, and I can tell you, the poverty was absolutely breathtaking. It was, people were on the edge of starving. I was there in the winter in Kaliningrad, and it was insane. I mean, people burning their furniture to keep warm. That is the cauldron in which autocracies thrive.
Right, and you're talking about an autocracy that rose from the ashes when Vladimir Putin went to work for the mayor of St. Petersburg as an ex-KGB officer, and his job was to bring together, to bring under control the looting of state assets in that part of Russia.
Right.
And he did. He used ex-KGB and active FSB officers to essentially guarantee the mafia their share or kill them.
Yeah.
And that being done, that brought him to the attention of Yeltsin, who needed that done on a national scale. But Putin is a different kind of person. When he got out of the KGB, he was in his late 40s. And he saw that Russia needed, like all Russians know, a strong central leader that could give them the consumerism that they needed and bring to order the oligarchy under him.
Yeah, I'm not trying to excuse this, but I think that was fairly predictable given the situation. Sure. Like I said, I was in the country the day that the Yeltsin was elected, and which was bizarre. I mean, just the whole election, I could tell you wild stories. But The other thing that fascinates me, and I'd love to get your opinion on this, and we're just about out of time. We got about a minute and a half left. Is when Trump was bankrupt. According to his son, both his sons now have been on the record saying, most of our assets are coming from Russia. Do you think it's possible that he was so bankrupt that he couldn't get loans from American banks anymore? He turned to Russian oligarchs, and that was the point at which his fate and future were sealed because he now owes them his entire empire? I mean, his family would be living on Skid Row if they were to pull their loans?
Well, absolutely. Deutsche Bank secured those loans, but they were backed by Russian oligarchs. And, Robert Mueller got access to those bank documents last December. So that's all going to come out. But one last thing. When you do that, when an intelligence officer like Putin dangles money out from his richest friends in front of you, he now owns you. And a guy like him, a human intelligence officer, will manipulate him. But another thing that he'll do is he saw Trump was easy, that he could build a meta-narrative around him to where Trump's decision-making process will always and forever benefit his base, which is Russia and its oligarchs.
Yeah. Malcolm Nance, his new book is The Plot to Destroy Democracy. The website is thetacticsofterror.org. You can tweet him at Malcolm Nance. Malcolm, thanks a lot for dropping by today. Good talking with you.